Wondering if I might trouble you for a cup of strong black coffee, and in the process engage you with an anecdote of no small amusement.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of NerdyVerse here at Nerd Herder.
Welcome.
I'm J-Dub,
And the Boop.
and we're here. We're back doing our thing, back on the horse, the Bat Horse.
The Bat Horse. I'm sure it's been done before. Multiple sources confirm.
I'm
It's
sure
been
he's got a
before.
Bat Horse somewhere. Adam
I'm-
West's Batman definitely has a Bat Horse.
I think he is the Bat Horse.
He is the Bat Horse. Get up and ride your Adam West Bat Horse, guys. Welcome to the show. If you can't tell, we're talking about Batmans still here because we are looking forward to, much like a lot of people, the newest and latest entry in the Batman verse.
Yes.
There's many a Batman to discuss, and so what we wanted to do leading up to the new one with Robert Pattinson Bats is look back at those that have come before, those that you might say paved the way for his sparkly, glistening body, and just discuss those with other people that love Batman and only Batman.
Only Batman.
No, we're an equal opportunity Bat love show here, and we searched and scoured the internet. We didn't have to go far because we know a lot of cool and crazy people, and a lot of people that are particularly fascinated with bats and their nipples. And so, when thinking of who could possibly do these films justice, the two Batmans with the most nipple to film ratio, we could think of none other than the lovely, illustrious, and
Quite nipply.
swole and nipply Kev.
What's
Hi,
up,
buddy.
Dying back here, man.
I just genuinely hope that you applied the chapping balm just in case.
Right.
No, I'm wearing tassels. I'm wearing tassels.
Little bat tassels for your
just
bat
in
nips.
case. Just in case.
I feel like we need all right, parental warning here. There's going to be a lot of bat nips in this episode.
It's true.
We're going to see how many bat nips you can fit in a podcast today.
Absolutely.
Bursting to the seams.
Right.
boys.
Cutting
Kev-
glass.
Kev, how are you and your nipples right now?
Not chafed.
Good.
Totally erect and titillated. And ready to discuss perhaps the most colorful entries into the Batman pantheon, the Schumacher films.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, these films, colorful is an appropriate word.
Yes.
The Dark Knight has never looked so bright as when Joel Schumacher took the helm.
Full tilt.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. And
boy,
so,
howdy is it.
and these aren't the only nipples we're going to have on screen today. We also have returning friend of the show and Bat Elite, Justus.
Hi, Justus.
You know, we can't talk about Batman without talking about Justice.
Hey.
Yeah, Batman. I'm Justice. I don't know. Whatever I want to be. Whatever I want to be. No.
Right. Just don't talk about Martha.
Why would you say
Why
that?
Why would you say that? Well, welcome back to the show. Justice, feels like you never left.
It does. It does. I'm still hungry from last time. I'm gonna be honest with you. I haven't eaten.
Didn't eat, drink, or sleep. You were just waiting to talk about Batman.
Mm-hmm.
I've been
As
sitting here
always.
for like a week.
Right.
It's true.
You can see my beard grew in.
Right. I'm kind of disappointed you didn't wear the onesie, Kev. I thought maybe that was going to be your uniform for this event.
I would, but it's not cold enough here in Texas, and like that thing.
Is it ever?
Occasionally, like for like 2 hours,
Right.
then that thing, it's as comfortable as it is, it gets stifling.
Oh, I
I
am
can
sure
imagine.
that's a great word for Texas in general. Stifling. Shout out to Texas.
Don't do that. Don't encourage us. Don't encourage us.
Shout out to a specific place in
Oh.
Texas.
Well, I'm certainly glad we're coming in hot with some fun and some energy because I think it's very easy to do an episode like this about films like these and just be another podcast that complains on the internet. whereas I'm hopeful, and certainly from my perspective, I think this can be a lot of fun because these films are actually pretty dang fun.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so, coming in hot with that, we're coming in from a positive perspective. Obviously, the comment section, both here live and later after the fact, is open. We will have the Holy Jerry in there,
Yes.
blessing people and,
The
and
Holy
praying for
Jerry.
you if these films ruined your childhood. But otherwise, we're just trying to be open and accepting of all Batmen, certainly. And one thing we wanted to do going into each episode, because we make no mistake, this isn't flattery, this isn't platitudes. We picked each and every guest for a reason, um, mostly because it was the short list of people we thought of when we were like, we should talk about Batman. And for a reason,
Mhm.
I'm sure. And so I wanted to open up for that. Justice, I'm not going to ask you because you were here last week. You kind of already did this.
Yeah.
But Kev, for you, why Batman? What is it about Batman that you love so much?
So I did watch the Burton episode, and I knew this was coming, so I had plenty of time to think about it.
You write your
Good.
And
thesis.
yeah, so I mean, as far back as I have memory, Batman has been a presence in my life, and I was always fascinated with it from a young age on, because I grew up with I was a year old when Batman '89 came out, but so later on I watched it. I remember Batman Returns around the time it came out, and Batman in the animated series was obviously a big thing in my life. And in thinking about what my draw to it is, what pulled me to that character was, it's the dark side. And he's a character, he's an individual that has found a way to channel, harness, and direct that darkness. And as a kid, I was always kind of attracted to the darker, more macabre stuff like Batman or horror movies or Spawn, things that were just a little edgier, right? And it was a Batman was a way for me to relate to that darkness, right?
Yeah.
And it was fascinating that there was a character out there that was able to create a physical manifestation of that, and that was always very fascinating to me. And I think, like, in thinking about it years later, that's probably the core of my draw to that character. Yeah,
I get that. I like
and
that.
nipples.
And
And
nipples,
nipples.
yeah.
Yeah.
I like that. And what's funny is, I mean, you could say in general with Batman's, that's very on brand, but oddly enough, I think even in these colorful, weird movies, they actually address a lot of that
Mhm.
sort of redirection that you're talking about with Bruce Wayne's character.
Absolutely.
They're not all goofs and gaffs like I think a lot of people
Yeah.
remember them to be.
Yeah,
It's a lot of goofs and gaffs, though.
it is a lot. It is a lot.
It's a lot of fun.
Yeah,
Um,
and it's cool because Joel Schumacher was especially with Batman Forever, he was kind of dipping into two different things, right? Like the Silver Age Batman, which is obviously something he grew up with, which was a little brighter.
right.
It wasn't as heavy on the subject matter, but he was also attempting to dip into year one. There's a little bit of year one in there. And what I think is notable for Batman Forever and what it should get credit on is, for the time, it was one of the first Batman movies that kind of focused on Batman. Like, he had an arc, like the Burton films are great. Don't get me wrong.
Sure.
But like, Tim Burton was really kind of fascinated with the villains, which makes sense for a guy like Tim Burton.
It's a style.
Yeah.
Exactly. And, the Batman Bruce Wayne character in Batman Forever, he actually gets an arc. He is a central focus of the film, which was interesting for the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I remember, and Justice, you and I have kind of talked about this off camera recently, unintentionally.
Yeah.
It just Batman comes up when we're together.
Right.
Like
Yeah,
I've
for
always
sure.
been super judgy of Kilmer's Bruce Batman.
Yes, you have.
I don't really like Kilmer. I'm just gonna
No,
put
you
that out there.
don't.
It's a personal bias. But I think his definitely got the most roundness to his
Mhm.
character. Like regardless of who played him, I felt like the characterization was way better fleshed out. I liked the stuff with him dealing with his past. I liked the stuff of him dealing with mentorship of Robin and all of that. And arguably, you could even say I like Chris O'Donnell's Robin as a sort of mirror for his character. Um, and so, yeah, I absolutely think this is the most Batman movie,
Mhm.
for sure.
And, this movie is incredibly queer coded.
Oh yeah.
So very queer coded.
Oh
Like,
yes.
it could be like a coming out story for
Oh yes.
if
Yeah.
look, okay, here's the thing.
Can see that.
When I talk to other queer people, if you ask the question, oh, what's the movie that made you gay? One of the most popular responses is Batman Forever because of Chris
Really?
O'Donnell as Robin.
Yeah.
Really?
Yes.
I mean,
Interesting.
let's be real. He's a dashing young man. My only complaint with Chris O'Donnell was he was 23.
Way
Yes,
too
playing
old.
a what,
Man.
16,
Well,
17?
Yeah, like he's 23, but like,
Yeah.
dude, you look 30.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
he's just a
He's
like,
Put an
always
earring in his ear.
Yeah,
right. He's
exactly.
always, and that's a him thing. That wasn't a
yeah.
right. Let's make you look younger and hipper. Like, no, that was just Chris O'Donnell.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I try to be open with comic adaptations to film in that it may not always hit the right mark. It might not be boy wonder. It might not necessarily aim for the same target. But it definitely was a complete shift when because Robin just screams youth.
Mhm.
Like his whole character is kind of the embodiment of a young Batman.
Mhm.
And so for a 20 something to kind of be that character for this one, it feels weird.
A little bit. But it's perfectly
Yeah.
in keeping with like casting choices that you would get in 1995. Like
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
You're
It's
not
perfectly
you're
in
not getting a
keeping.
kid on
Yeah.
screen
No.
in that role.
No. And like let's say a good thing about Chris O'Donnell's Robin in Batman Forever, that costume was sick.
It is wonderful.
It was a play on like his actual, the Robin back in the day or whatever, and making that rubber. It sounds weird
Yeah.
saying it, but it actually, yeah, that was one of my favorite parts. To be honest,
Yeah.
even when I first saw it, I was like, man, that's kind of dope. As a kid, you're like, that's the best costume in the world. Minus the nipples or added the nipples, whatever.
Add the nipples.
They should
That
have
was the
been
best.
more
Don't be afraid of the nipple.
They should have
Right.
been more obtrusive, like really, really uncomfortably large areolas and like a half-inch longer.
Make
You know?
them make them weapons
The weapons, yeah.
Exactly.
of mass destruction.
Go bat nipples.
It
No,
it
but it's
definitely
funny how everybody talks about the nipples, but nobody addresses not as much. Because it's usually right after the nipple scene or the nipple suit part of the suit, and they turn around and do the butt part of the
butt.
suit.
The butt,
Yes.
yeah.
It's like
But
nipple.
it's very good.
Oh
And
yeah.
then boom.
Like let's hand it to Joel Schumacher, man. Those suit up montages.
He knew what he was
Mwah.
doing.
I will say that does, other than the butt, it does get you pretty pumped up. Like when they're putting on the gauntlets, they're grabbing their weapon. Like
Yeah.
it feels like, all right, let's go kick some.
Oh,
What's funny is I've been kind of on this journey. If anybody hangs around Star Wars Twitter, you might see the Star Wars shot by shot account.
Mhm.
There might actually be a couple, but there's one in particular that's going through the Attack of the Clones film, and it's exactly what it sounds like. It's just a tweet per shot per day or so. Um, and some Lucasfilm staff have been like catching on to that and sharing little tidbits of information. And what I've learned is how much in post production isn't actually the actors.
Mhm.
Like the amount of times that Dooku walking down a hall isn't Christopher Lee, or the amount of times that Django pushing a button isn't Tamara Morrison. And so I love to think about like the ladies that swoon in that scene of seeing Val Kilmer's rubber clad butt, and it's Chad from accounting.
It's Bill the
just-
Grip.
It's
Yeah,
just
get the
some
guy's butt.
guy.
Double
Yeah.
caked up on a Thursday afternoon. Good job, Chad.
Like
Um,
here's a radical thought. Like Bob Kane was on the set of
Yeah.
Batman Forever. What if that's Bob Kane's butt?
right.
I
Well,
love that.
and on the
Good for him.
topic of butts, before we get somehow serious from this, if Captain America is America's ass, like whose is Batman's?
the ghetto.
That's Gotham's ass.
The ghetto.
That
I
man,
mean, yeah,
that's
that's
the
the
whole
Joel's
hood.
ass.
He's
Right.
Vengeance's ass.
I think it was Justice on the last one. Like you made that parallel of like, I mean, that's just white Detroit. Like
Yeah.
that's just Gotham is just straight up like an analogy of gang violence, the hood, like all of that stuff.
Really,
So
really.
I mean, that's the cool thing about the Schumacher films is like, you know, with the Burton films, you get this really like gothic and you know, Boop said it, German expressionist kind of version of Gotham. And with the Schumacher films, it's like it's almost like Vegas. It's bright and there's neon and
Awesome.
stuff. And it was really interesting because like in some of the later films, it looks like any other city. It looks like I was in Chicago last year and there's buildings in Chicago. It's like, I've seen that one.
Mhm.
You
yeah,
know? With the Schumacher films, it had this entirely interesting and new look that like if only they had the time to explore that more and to get more street level with it and to get more shots of that, because that was a really fascinating Gotham to see, because I don't think I've ever seen Gotham represented like that ever since, you know?
No.
for sure. Like
They
of all
definitely
of
had a. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
no, I was just gonna say of all of the things that like have stuck around from the Gothic Burton influence, the architecture of Gotham itself is like the quickest thing they moved on from.
Yeah.
Actually,
Makes me
Mm.
sad. I miss
Yeah.
the angles and the giant statues.
Yeah.
I
what were you
like,
gonna
For
say,
me,
Justin?
oh no, I was gonna say I feel like they definitely spent a lot of time showing the people more. I mean, I know that there was a couple of scenes in Batman and Batman Return where you see, you know, the people, you know, they're on whatever City
You see
Hall,
the
whatever they
the,
were.
the 12 extras they got in front
Yeah,
of the fake bank. Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
just for, you know, the Joker's people to shoot them all down. But
Yeah.
but in Schumacher, you see a lot of news reports. You see a lot of the like the people where Bruce Wayne is going to the circus, and it's all these people. Bruce Wayne is going to the what is the ball or something like that.
Yeah.
And going all these places where you see all these, you know, people, the actual people of Gotham
A
that
lot of
make up
actual
Gotham.
nightlife
And Commissioner
and
Gordon
whatnot.
constantly. That dude
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
everywhere.
Right? He's at all the
Gossip
major
Gertie.
functions.
Yeah, Gossip Gertie.
Gossip Gertie too.
Well, and I mean that kind of gets onto I think the biggest direction that a lot of people go with these films, and it's an easy one to kind of pick on in that they're just a huge tone shift. I mean,
Mhm.
from the design of Gotham to the design of the heroes and villains, I think, to the humor, to the sort of line deliveries and everything. There's definitely a bit more easygoing approach to these films. I don't know if I mean, Kev, you mentioned like the dark and the mysterious Batman and whatnot, but like, I don't know if you have a preference of your stoic Batman versus your quippy Batman, your colorful Gotham versus your kind of just gothic Gotham.
I don't necessarily have a preference. I just meet it where it is. I'm totally open to as many different interpretations of this character as you want, because I think that like if it's just one way, that's boring. Like that's just like you know, I want different interpretations. I want everything from the Bright Knight of Adam West to, you know, 5'9" little Batman and Michael Keaton, and you know, I want all of it because it's all interesting and it all fits within its own little thing, you know? Like, so with the Schumacher film specifically, it was like, you know, yeah, if you try to compare it to what we live in now, the kind of the modern comic book age we live in now, of course it's going to leave you wanting. But if you meet it where it is, then it's like, all right, man, this is kind of cool. Like it's like watching a live action cartoon in a weird way. Like there's a little seriousness, right? Like they're going to get you with a little bit of seriousness, but there's a whole lot of bright camp and fun, and it's like in 1995, that's a summer blockbuster movie, right?
Mhm.
Very true.
That's what it was.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. These films in particular definitely feel like cartoon come to life.
Yeah.
And I think that's a very okay thing because anybody can really if you turn your brain off, be entertained by it from kid to adult, everything.
Mhm.
And it's funny because I agree with you, Kev, that if you meet these films in where they're at, you see that they fit in their own universe.
Mhm.
Nothing about Val Kilmer or George Clooney's Batman feels out of place in their respective films.
Yeah.
No.
And it's very easy to say, well, but those just don't feel like, the serious Dark Knight Batman. Well, honestly, though, if you go back to 89 and Returns, I don't think they do either.
No.
No.
Watch the Batman television show for Pete's sake.
Well,
Yeah.
very true. Like,
Yeah.
I think you hit the nail on the head in that every Batman's been perfect for its thing.
Sure.
Mhm.
And I think it's only when we start comparing and crossing over fences that you start to see maybe a little disappointment or a little bit of differences where you
Of
start to
course.
feel
Yeah.
lacking.
Yeah, there's a
Of
Batman
course.
for every flavor.
Exactly. Like, I mean, it's like if you want to see a Batman with a body count, Keaton.
Right.
Yes.
Keaton's Batman murked people constantly.
Mhm.
If you want to see a Batman that has a Discover card, well, you got George Clooney,
Right.
which
Yep.
bothered me because, like, who sends him a statement? Like,
Right.
Good
Well,
point.
all of the things that have to happen for you to get a Bat credit card, buddy.
Yeah.
like, what's
Yeah.
his interest rate? I gotta
Right.
know.
Does he just have like a carte blanche? Like, what's going on here?
Like,
Also, like, I mean, I guess people assume he's got money, but it's funny in that scene with Poison Ivy and Batman and Robin where it's just like $5 million. It's just like, wait a minute. All right, hang on, Batman.
Yeah.
How do you have that much money?
Exactly.
I am so happy you said that,
Yeah.
man. I am so happy because,
Let's talk about it.
like Robin gives away the game. He's like, I'll borrow it from you. Wait a
Right.
minute. Like,
Huh, you live in Gotham. You have endless amounts of money, apparently.
Apparently.
That's
I-
exactly
You have a
it.
loud cat.
Like, someone's in the crowd being like, anyone else picking up on this? Like,
Right.
that's Bruce Wayne.
Just pull up a list of millionaires in Gotham and just go down the list. I mean, like,
I
no,
guarantee it's one.
right? Like, no, he's too geriatric. No, this one's too dark skinned. What? Bruce Wayne?
It
Yeah,
fits.
right.
It
I
sounds
want to
Especially with, like,
familiar.
see.
Especially with George Clooney. Like, he didn't modulate his voice at all.
No, he
Like,
didn't. It was just
No.
George Clooney.
My thing.
Right.
I
He
wanna
sounds and looks
see-
just like George Clooney. His head does the George Clooney thing.
Yes.
I can't get over it. I love
Like-
it because he's George Clooney and he does it in every movie. So it's
Yeah.
like,
He's a very
can't do it,
specific guy to get. He's a
Yeah.
very specific guy to get. It was a choice.
Yeah.
This is a
Yeah.
very big
George Clooney's
choice.
like Robert Downey Jr. He's not going to play a character. He's going to
He's
play
gonna-
George Clooney. He's like,
Exactly.
hey, I'm going to show up today. You're going to give me some lines to read. I'm going to put the cowl on. I'm going to read the lines, and you're going to pay me a whole lot of money. Okay, cool.
Because I'm George Clooney. Shut up.
Exactly.
Right.
And I got to go shoot ER after this. Okay.
Right. And then somebody wants to talk to me about a goat. I don't know what that one's in. Well, so on that note, I mean, like, Justice, I know you were pretty definitive in last week's, and I know a lot of people are. Keaton is Batman for a lot of people, and I totally get it. I really like his outing, his films a lot. But like Kilmer and Clooney, how do you feel about those guys donning the cowl for a little bit?
man, to be honest with you, I mean, like I said in the last show, the eyebrows, Michael Keaton eyebrows is what does it for me. That's the face of Bruce Wayne / Batman for me. But Val Kilmer, he, first of all, he wears a lot of black. He wears more black, I think, than any of the other Batmans. And I love, first of all, if y'all know me, if you know my favorite color is black. So
Right.
like, other than this, like everything else in my closet is black or like gray or whatever. So I love that he wore so much black in there. But on top of that, I actually did like his voice.
Yeah.
His voice made sense to me as Batman. I mean, even Bruce Wayne, when he was talking to Chase, Dr. Chase. I'm calling Dr. Chase. I'm not gonna call it Dr. Meridian. It sounds better, Dr. Chase. But his Bruce Wayne voice sounds good. His Batman voice sounds good, and that's a big thing for me is the Batman voice.
Sure.
You know, so that was a big thing. His always the facial expressions with everybody in the costume is weird to me. It's so hilarious because Michael Keaton, he has a thing where his suit is like a big one piece, so he has to look up like that.
Yeah.
Turn his whole body up. Kilmer does this thing where he does the turn to the left and right, where his whole kind of head goes, but his eyes shift before his. I watched way too closely, but his eyes shift.
That's why
more
you're
than the
here.
rest of his body. But Clooney, I mean, we talked about it. Clooney is Clooney. He's Clooney because his head shakes. But I don't have an issue with. I have some issues. I'm saying I have some issues. Slightly, I have some issues with Clooney playing Batman, but how we just like we're talking about, everybody has their own place in that movie. Even Michael Keaton had. I was not a fan of the suits because that was around the time, 80s, 90s, where they had the shoulder pads and stuff, and not a huge fan of the suits in that movie. And I was like, Bruce Wayne would dress like that. He's too cool. But that's because in my day, shoulder pads wasn't as much.
Right.
Thing,
It wasn't in anymore.
So right. So, but Val Kilmer probably one of my favorites. Is the weird thing to say, just because the voice and because he wore a lot of black.
Yeah.
That works. He definitely fit all around aesthetic, I think.
Yeah.
Like you were saying. It's funny that each one kind of picked, or I guess maybe the art department picked for them like what worked. So like with Keaton, it was a lot of turtlenecks. With him, it was a lot of button coats. Because it was kind of that almost fancy but not quite fancy kind of vibe.
Comfortable fancy.
And then Clooney's nothing but sweats. Watch that movie and tell me he doesn't own just a bunch of sweats.
He is comfortable all the time.
I'm pretty sure he walked away with the biggest check and yet wore the least expensive clothing.
Exactly.
It was probably just Hilfiger.
Yeah.
Probably. I mean, like, I think I'm partial as well to Val Kilmer just because I grew up watching Tombstone with my dad. And that man will always be Doc Holliday in my mind. Like
he's the bad guy from MacGruber for me. I mean, that's the most accurate film of his.
I love Val Kilmer just in general.
He's all right.
You have such weird opinions with actors.
I do,
I can tell because Nick Cage is just staring at you. He's just staring you down. He's burning a hole in you.
That's a special man.
You watched The Rock last night. Don't tell me that you can't watch a Nick Cage.
I watched that for Sean Connery. Thank you.
One of my favorite movies, and Sean Connery.
Absolutely, sir.
And Nick Cage.
I will say I knew I loved Keaton, so nothing really changed about my opinions going back to those for these episodes. Oddly enough, it is Kilmer's that kind of like I alluded to earlier. That was the one for me where it's just like, wow, I kind of really like this outing for Batman.
Sure.
And I just think the story was there that hadn't quite been there. It wasn't just the A to B is Batman versus the Joker or Batman facing off these villains.
Right.
It seemed like the villain plot was even all far off to the side, and then the Bruce Wayne deal was the majority. Or at least that's kind of how I went into it.
Sure. I think Batman Forever was incredibly well balanced between the villains, the heroes, and the ancillary stuff, right? Like, I mean, because like I said before, with like Batman Returns especially, the Catwoman and Penguin get a lot of screen time, right? Like they dominate that movie.
Good.
With Batman Forever, I mean, especially like let's talk about the casting choices for the villains because Tommy Lee Jones is Two-Face, Jim Carrey is the Riddler. You can't get much better than that, and they went full tilt.
Kevin, I'm in charge of this show.
Sorry.
Does anybody else feel like a fried egg?
Let's talk about the villain. No, I'm just kidding.
Now let's talk about it.
I legitimately tried to make sure because last time I felt like we went way long on the villains because I mean we did it when we did the Spider-Man movies, man. It's just so good. I don't know why sometimes the villains are so dominating when it comes
Mhm.
to these comic book films. But
Someday when we talk about Suicide Squad, like
oh
Yeah.
right,
Well, I mean, like heroes don't get to hero without a foil.
exactly.
You know?
and kind
Smart
of
man.
like you talked about when why Batman's personally important to you, like that's definitive truths. It's a kid who went through tragedy and turned that into a weapon to prevent other tragedies.
Mhm.
He might
Ooh.
struggle with putting on the cowl sometimes. He might have to learn some lessons still, but that's Batman. Like we
Mhm.
don't really play with that much. The villains, um, both in different outings with each one, because everybody likes to do a unique thing. Every Joker's got to be different,
Mhm.
everything's got to be unique. Um, but even within their own stories, they get to flex in ways the hero never really does.
Certainly.
And so it pays to get people like you said that are insane, literally. Like
Legitimately.
Jim Carrey and Tommy Lee Jones,
Dude.
as far as Batman Forever, all-star casting right there.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Mm.
this
Oh,
was
yeah.
another one of those movies that we wore out the Blockbuster VHS copy
Oh
of
yes.
Batman Forever.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
we annoyed my parents so much with screaming every single one of the Riddler's lines.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we talked about it when watching it of just like well, I mean, kind of the same thing they did with Clooney, I know, but they just let him show up and
Yeah.
do their thing.
Do
Yeah.
it.
You
Have
got Jim
fun.
Carrey to be Jim Carrey, like
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's
It-
even like that. There's a self-aware line that Jim Carrey does at the end of Batman Forever, where he does like that, "God am I," and he goes real deep, like a death metal growl with that.
Mhm.
Is that over the top? I can never tell. Like that's not the character. That was Jim Carrey,
right?
you know. And that guy was like
And
in the
it's
mid
excellent.
'90s. He was a notorious scene stealer,
Yeah.
like notorious. Like people hated playing next to the guy because it's like, how do you compete with that?
Right.
I'll tell you how. Tommy Lee Jones.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. Well, and that's what's funny
Which
is that their chemistry is so good for that because it feels like he is going to come in and do the Carrie thing of, all right, now I'm the villain. Look
Mhm.
at me, I'm the villain now. But there's constantly that tug of war
Yeah.
with them. It doesn't get
Yeah.
to a point like Penguin and Catwoman felt like it did, where Penguin was really big in the front half and then sidelined.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And then, oh, we should deal with him. But let's make sure we resolve that Selena Kyle stuff.
Yeah. And resolve it they did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What were you going to say, Justice?
Oh no, I was just thinking about the like you guys were saying the chemistry. I remember watching the movie and it was a lot of they did a lot of close scenes. Like Tommy Lee and Jim Carrey, they were on each other. Like there were a couple times where Jim Carrey was like, he was like hanging on him and stuff
Mhm.
like that. And it's super. Obviously, it's
They were
animated and
Mhm.
really, but in doing some of the research on that, from what I hear, they had a lot of beef.
Mhm.
Like Jim Carrey and Tommy Lee Jones, there was a lot of beef between them, like to the point where Schumacher was like, I don't want to work with either one of them ever again.
Wow.
Yeah.
But there was beef, like it's crazy.
Yeah.
But you would never see it on the screen.
No.
I kept looking at the movie and I'm like, is there anything that shows, a little body language or something like that? Nothing that called out, which says a lot about their acting skill and professionalism. So
Yep.
Yeah.
That did not surprise me. That little tidbit did not surprise me because, a little anecdote. Tommy Lee Jones had a house in our city here where I live in San Antonio, and a company that I worked for previously had serviced his home, and everyone knew, don't talk to him. Leave him alone, because if you try to talk to him, he will let you know, and you will not be pleased with the outcome. So
he seems like that type.
Yeah.
very much so. Like he's a
And
professional.
I was going to say,
professional.
and I mean that in a fair way. Like he's a dude just like any other dude.
Sure.
It's just that he definitely has a bit of a platform when he goes off.
Mhm.
Where do I have to go to get that? Like,
Hollywood.
can I just like put that out into the world? Don't talk to me
Right. Like
unless
just
you want to get like smacked in the mouth.
that just don't mess with me energy.
Yeah.
I like
you can color your hair and you can get away with it. So
I'm too approachable,
there you
man.
go.
What's the problem?
I definitely think it's not surprising just because of like especially the villains the actors go through a lot to bring those to life.
Yes.
Both in Batman Forever, like in all of them, but we're talking about Batman Forever and in Batman and Robin, like the kind of physical work that they have to endure, the makeup, and then capturing these bigger than life characters and keeping it up the whole time. Um, like I can see being very done with it, and it's one thing to do it for yourself, but then to have to put up with somebody else that also has to do it in their own way. I would be pissed off quick with people. Like
Absolutely.
I wouldn't have much left in the way of patience for that.
Oh yeah. I mean, like, and you got to hand to the Schumacher films because, like, when it comes to the villains, A1, like Batman and Robin, especially, like when they were thinking about Mr. Freeze, and they're looking at the script, and the script is like 97% just one-liners, and they're like, okay, who do we get to sell this and like really commit to it? Who else but Arnold Schwarzenegger? Who else?
Right.
Who else?
Master.
Exactly.
Master.
Because he commits. He puts his whole ass into that.
Well, and I think there's a degree of like pride there, because I mean, 80s action, like it's not just doing the action, it's being able to quip with it, right?
Yes.
Because you really didn't kick anybody's butt if you didn't insult them afterwards.
Exactly.
You know?
Absolutely.
You cannot look into someone's face and go, "Don't bother my friend. He's dead tired," and like not kick some ass.
Exactly.
Like, right
Oh, be still my beating heart.
Oh, Commando's right there.
This is a great time to test this button.
Blah. There you go. The pun button. The button.
Yes.
No, yeah, like Arnold did a lot. And I get it's not necessarily the most memorable probably of his career. He's definitely done more drama since, he's done more comedy since. But he does all of it in this movie.
Yeah.
He does the 80s action that he's built for. He does the humor that he's good at, and he also does the seriousness that nobody expects from him.
And he does it all so freaking well.
It's all 100%.
Because that's Arnold freaking Schwarzenegger, and you do not expect less than 100 bajillion% from him.
Oh, he commits fully, and like we got to give Batman and Robin some credit here. Like they pulled the Mr. Freeze story directly from Heart of Ice. Right? One of the most like titular Mr. Freeze stories that we ever got. And there's shades of that in Batman and Robin. Like it's not the deepest shades of it, but it's there.
It's Lady in Ice or in Water
Yeah.
or in Bacta at this point.
Yeah.
Like wherever she's at.
Gelatin lady.
Exactly. Put your wife in a Jello mold. Wait for put her in
Wait
the
for a
fridge.
cure.
Exactly.
Wait for a Jello cure. I mean, I think if he had the whole film, if he was the villain, I think more could have definitely been done there.
Sure.
I think a lot was chosen for him to be able to balance, because like to his opposite, you've got Uma Thurman doing an amazing job as Poison Ivy, and a very different portrayal of that as well. She's not this sort of alluring altogether she-villain. She's kind of all crazy all the time. They definitely go for a much more unhinged side of it.
Oh yeah.
And so I think really the smart choice of Mr. Freeze was, that's a serious story to contrast a ridiculous story.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And then Bane.
And then Bane.
Oh,
Bane.
I love Bruce Bane.
Yeah.
I love him so much.
I think he's just he's a misunderstood soul.
Yeah, I mean, the ending scene where he's placing the bombs in the observatory, just going bomb.
Bomb. Dude, there's a kid that comes to our class that's that.
Yes.
Like you give them a
out
job and they talk through it, and it's just the same thing over and over. And it's just like, you okay, buddy? Yes. Like, all right, cool.
We'll talk to you later.
I love it. I don't know that there's too much to say about Bane, but he's definitely
he's happy
a lot
to
of
see
fun.
Bane. Honestly, I'm always happy to see Poison Ivy in general.
Yeah.
I'm always happy to see
I would like to see more of her.
Yeah.
That sounds bad. Just say I've heard myself say that.
I mean,
would love to see
You and the entire crowd at the auction, man. Like,
Right.
Oh my
Right.
gosh, can we talk about that awkward scene? Oh,
Okay, first we gotta talk about the entire monkey dance that leads up to the auction scene, which was for some
way
reason
longer than I remember.
it was the
Yeah.
sticking point of that movie in my mind for so long. I could not remember what it was from for the longest time. But then I rewatched it like a few years ago and I was like, the monkey.
Yeah.
The sexy Uma Thurman monkey.
Right.
Yeah. I mean,
Uh,
try not to feel things.
Right?
Well, yeah, like that whole ball thingy.
What was it?
I don't. I mean, I know what they were doing. Like they were auctioning off. Like the idea is like dance with one pretty lady to dance with her. You've got to be the highest bidder, and the money goes towards the telescope thing.
Yeah.
Like there's plot. There is plot. I
There-
Yeah,
promise.
they're
there's a
trying to
plot
lure
there
Mr. Freeze in
somewhere.
with a diamond.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But like I want to know who was in charge of planning that party because that was
were a
the
freak.
wildest thing. Also, it's for a science observatory, and you went with plants and nature and
Yeah,
jungle.
they went with
Yeah.
let's-
I mean,
just-
like,
I just don't know.
I just feel sorry for the person who has to clean up after that. Like, just the janitors afterwards, after Mr. Freeze has like demolished the place, and like,
Oh,
there's one guy like, I'm not
absolutely.
cleaning this. I'm done.
Right. No, that Brachiosaurus is not going back up after
No.
this.
No, there could be an entire subplot of the movie of just workers being like, no, I'm done. I'm moving to Metropolis.
That's it.
Well, and speaking of workers, like a big shout out to the real life workers who made those sets come to life. Because
Yes.
as much as I tease how ridiculous the nature ball was and
It was
whatnot,
beautiful.
Oh, yeah.
that the museum scene,
Oh,
like
in Forever, Two Faces Lair.
yeah,
That
well,
was
Oh,
insanely cool.
there's so many
yeah.
sets in these versus just the streets of Gotham or
Mhm.
warehouses of the Burton films. Here, somebody used a classic Star Wars Kenner line to describe these films. The toyetic nature of these films. The idea that everything is selling a toy
Mhm.
is these are play sets
Yeah.
through and
Yeah.
through, and I want them.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's no coincidence that like Batman Forever was the first Batman film in which he had a costume change. And
Yeah.
that
Right.
costume change was not entirely serving the story. It was like, this
No,
looks
it's
cool and
not.
kids are going to buy that toy.
Which
you know?
it switches back right in the middle of the movie, and then they go back to the silvery costume.
Yeah.
Mm.
At least it does for Robin.
No, that in Batman and Robin.
In
Yeah.
Batman.
But
That's right.
I will say it made more sense in Forever than it did in Batman and Robin because at least the Riddler blew up the suits in
Yes.
Forever.
Yes.
So it's kind of all right. So this is the basement suit.
yeah, it was
uh,
always weird. Like, oh, we have these ice suits just in case, like it's a
Right.
cold day
Yeah.
out.
Oh, the boots with the ice skates come out.
Yes,
right.
that is ridiculous.
Well, and
Dude, that had shark repellent bat spray written all over it.
exactly.
well, and another friend of the show and a Schumacher Batman apologist as well, Andy, who was on a few episodes back talking with us
Yeah.
about Solo: A Star Wars Story. They made a great point that these are the films that follow fairly directly to Adam West's.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Those kind of goofy things where they have something for every possible ridiculous situation.
Mhm.
I
Fully
mean,
rusted metal Batman.
Val Kilmer's Batman would not have felt out of place running around the streets with a bomb trying to figure out where to put it. Like
No.
it it's such a beautiful observation and definitely one that if you kind of adopt that view of these, I think you have way more fun with them.
Yeah.
For
Sure.
sure.
And something that I forgot to bring up earlier, but you reminded me with Batman Forever. Everyone is horny for Batman. Every single person.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Batman Forever is
Yeah.
the thirstiest Batman movie.
Yes, it is.
Absolutely.
Dr. Chase Meridian.
Well,
is-
yeah,
This-
because like Batman's he's not in the shadows. Like in Batman
Yeah.
Returns and in the first Batman, he's kind of like in the shadows, and the cops don't want to talk about him that much or anything like that.
Yeah.
Batman Forever, he's on the cover of Time.
Exactly.
Like
He's
of
a
course.
celebrity.
Yes. Yes.
Now, I was thinking about that the other night about how difficult that would be to compete
Mhm.
with like Batman and Bruce Wayne. Like it's difficult for Bruce Wayne to compete with Batman, which
Yeah.
makes
Fair.
sense for him that whole smile when he was like, "Yeah, she likes me." But that's I thought about that. I'm like, that's crazy to have to compete with,
Mhm.
Batman, a person that who you are. Like, do you at some point, like, hey, I'm gonna back up a little bit and I'm gonna make myself a little more cheesy so that Bruce Wayne can shine a little bit, or
Exactly.
Right. Don't wash
does
the bat
Bruce,
suit before you go out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Do you take advantage of that? You like, hey, nobody knows who I am. I can talk and say whatever I want to any lady that I want to say it to. Like, there's so many things. Like, there's so many layers to the competition that they can have, and I feel like that can mess with you a little bit mentally, also.
Mhm.
You
Oh,
know,
Yeah.
sure.
because
Well, and
you
I
you
think
can't fight that.
I think that's what speaks to the character, and I mean like the uprightness of Bruce's character, that he doesn't go that route, because that'd be the easy thing, is to create a completely opposite uh alter ego.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I kind of like we've alluded to last week. I think it was you, Justice, where it's just like, Batman is really who he is.
Mhm.
After that traumatic event, he became Batman,
Yeah.
and he constantly by day puts on a costume of Bruce Wayne. And so I think there's not really this, um, well, I've got to separate, I've got to differentiate. It's more just this, I've got to hide who I really am kind of thing,
Yeah.
instead of trying to compete with those natures. But I do like, I mean, they obviously highlight it with the romanticism and the sex appeal and everything, but like that's really the dilemma, right? Is it's just like people like Batman, they don't like Bruce Wayne.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It's so hard to be true to myself and to know who I really am when
Sure.
I've got fans like that.
Sure. And then like one thing they kind of touch on, if nothing else, they scratch the surface of it in Batman Forever and in Batman and Robin, is like there's probably a little part of Bruce Wayne that wants a normal life,
Mhm.
like a little bit, you know?
Absolutely.
And there's always the conflict because, how normal can you be when you've got this mission, right? Like,
Right.
Clooney's Batman, like he is very dismissive to that like throwaway character that he's dating in the movie.
Yeah.
He's very dismissive because
Who
he at that
watched
point he
Exactly.
realizes, what kind of normal life am I going to have,
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But like I
Well,
said, they only scratched the surface of that.
Yeah, they
oh
they
yeah.
did.
And I'll say one of the biggest things that definitely was different upon rewatch for me, just since you bring up Clooney, um, like he was just George Clooney. He was just very straight, uh,
Mhm.
in the majority of this film. In Batman and Robin, the thing that really works for me, and the reason I would care to rewatch it at all, is because of like how emotional the Alfred and Bruce stuff was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, that I don't know, but I have to believe maybe that's the lines they had him read that sold them of like, no, this is our guy for this movie.
Mhm.
Um, because he gives way more energy, I think, to bringing emotion and life to those scenes than he does at all as Batman, and I
Oh,
think that's
Yeah.
important.
yeah.
But I loved the the humanity of Bruce for once,
Yeah.
in Batman and Robin.
Yeah. And it's kind of funny about Batman and Robin is that like Alfred has a better arc than Bruce does,
Yeah,
you
he
know?
really does.
Very
And it's and
true.
it's it's good because like in Batman and Batman Returns and even Batman Forever, Alfred is kind of relegated to a background in a way. Like
Mhm.
he doesn't facilitate like the entity in Bruce's life that's always trying to keep him a little grounded. Like, the best Alfred is the one that's sarcastically quipping at Bruce and ribbing him and jibing him to kind of keep him grounded, like, okay, Dark Knight,
Yeah.
Right.
and you finally get a little bit of Alfred growing into a character in Batman and Robin, and it's cool because like Michael Go, is that his name?
Yeah.
Is that his name?
Uh,
Okay,
I
like
think
I
so.
think
I know it's Go or Gaw
yeah, like
something.
amazing actor, and
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
finally after 4 films they give him something to chew on.
yeah, exactly.
Right.
Like he's not just
Right.
furniture.
Yeah,
They
No,
definitely
man, but
really
he just
go ahead.
yeah. We got to stop doing this, John. We got.
Right.
I
Meet in the
just
middle.
dancing around each other. It's cute, honestly.
Oh, yeah, it is. It's me. I paused for a long time before I said.
Go for it.
No, but I mean, talk about Alfred, man. Like this love matchmaking thing, man. Like I don't know what to do with it. Like, 'cause in every movie, that's like his sole mission. It's like you cool, got you, do Batman thing, whatever you want to do to get help you sleep at night. But when you come back home, it's this girl that I've met at the store that she seemed like she might be real interesting. Y'all
Right.
should hook up.
She's blonde because that's your
Yeah.
only
Oh,
type, apparently.
Go to her.
Blonde women are the only ones that exist in Gotham.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they definitely didn't know what to do fully with Alfred.
No.
And that's clear. And I don't think it's necessarily a negative in any of the films. I think it's just like you said. It's stark when it does escalate beyond just the, putting up the bat suit, kind of just being there.
Yeah, because I mean, Alfred functions best when you realize that he's Bruce's only family.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And that is Bruce's only
Right.
father figure, and he means something to him. Alfred is
Yeah.
not just the guy who brings him dinner in bed, And
Right.
like when when Alfred gets to shine, he gets to shine in a lot of
Mhm.
movies. And that's the nice thing about Batman and Robin, is that like Alfred gets a moment in the sun.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and you get more of that Jiminy Cricket vibe that I think he's really supposed to kind of exemplify as his conscience.
Oh yeah.
He's the one steady light and reason for Bruce.
He's
Oh, yeah.
Constantly.
Bruce's humanity.
Yeah. I mean, like one of my favorite examples of that is Jeremy Irons in Batman v Superman, because
Mhm.
almost every scene in which it's just Bruce and Alfred, it is Alfred desperately trying to get Bruce to come back and step away from the edge and realize you've crossed the line. You are going too far. You need to pull back. And Bruce is just, nope,
Right.
Mhm.
And I mean, that for my money, it's really a toss up between Michael Caine and Jeremy Irons. But that was the one thing that was a little missing from the 90s films. But I still like Michael Go.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, he does
Yeah,
phenomenal
He
with
does
it.
wonderfully.
Yeah, and he had some great puns.
Oh,
Shall I
yes.
persuade you to
Oh,
take a
yeah.
sandwich with you, sir?
I'll get your food.
I think a lot of the characterization, obviously, especially for these films, went to their version of the Boy Wonder.
Mhm.
Chris O'Donnell as Robin, and then Silverstone as
Yes.
uh
That girl?
well, what she's not Gordon. She's not Barbara Gordon in
She's
this.
Barbara
No,
something.
she's not Barbara Gordon.
Yeah.
No.
Which
They-
that one I didn't
What
really
else?
like.
Barbara Pennyworth, maybe?
I
don't
guess
know.
Pennyworth,
I
yeah.
guess.
Yeah.
I think it was just so that they had a way to introduce her, because
Yeah.
if you realize, this Commissioner Gordon doesn't really hang with Batman.
He
Doesn't do anything.
No.
He's furniture.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He is furniture.
Yeah.
He is furniture to be sat on by Poison Ivy.
Right.
Yeah, pretty much.
I mean, he wishes.
Yeah,
Um,
honestly.
so,
Don't we all?
but yeah, like
You took my words. Yes.
right.
Not gonna say it.
Yeah, the Bat family emphasizes definitely on Robin and eventually sort of Batgirl.
Yes.
I
Sort of.
I get the vibe they were going for of, I mean, because they both films end the same way, right? It's Batman
Yeah.
and Robin running towards the screen. In the
Right.
end, it's all three. The
Mhm.
family grows.
Exactly. And I feel like what they gave Alicia Silverstone was you know what you did in Clueless, where you had this character who was ditzy and beautiful, but also smart. Try and do that again, but we're not going to give you nearly as much character development.
Yeah.
Right.
I
We don't know who Batgirl is, so instead just be female Bruce Wayne.
exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
You are book smart, but we're not going to explore that. You can ride motorcycles, but we're only going to explore that a little bit.
Yeah.
And I don't know. That entire crust punk motorcycle race scene was amazing.
Great.
It
Oh,
lasted
yeah.
just a little bit too long though.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, again, that's kind of they did what they could with an hour and a half runtime.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I think that's the biggest thing, is it's just because they were also still dealing with Batman and Robin. Like that, after one film, understandably, it's not a set thing. They're not completely in their gears yet.
Yeah.
And so you still have this developing relationship. Now we're going to add another character to grow into that as well. It's the classic Spider-Man conundrum of too much, not enough time.
Yeah.
It's just with the heroes instead of the villains this time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because these films are bold in how big they go.
Yes.
Yeah.
With not a lot of basis for why this should work. Why should it work to have 2.5 villains versus 2.5 heroes? You know,
Yeah.
I mean, that's biting off a lot.
Yeah.
And it was pretty common, I think, for superhero movies or comic book movies around that time. Was like it was so much emphasis on the spectacle, right? It was
Yeah.
like, look at these awesome new visual effects, and we can make Batman fall off a roof, and it's one seamless shot. Or look at this Batmobile launching off the ledge. Like it was so much spectacle that sometimes the story suffered because they didn't
Mhm.
have the screen time to dig in deep to that, because it's like the VFX departments is like, hey, check this out, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
But that's a film of the time. It was pretty endemic for that time. But yeah, I still like the Batmobile launching off stuff. That was cool.
Oh, that was
Oh, yeah.
very cool.
This was the Batmobile I owned as a kid. I remember it specifically. The blue translucent plastic with the tires and the engine part. Don't know
Mhm.
why. It's such a weird design choice, but it looked so good.
It's neat.
You know, so it's just like it did its job for me
Oh,
as
yeah.
a kid in that I fell in love with Batman. Like,
Oh yeah.
you know, I mean, it was these in the animated show where it's just like, yeah, I think I like Caped Crusaders.
Yeah,
You
man.
know?
Hey, everyone's been Batman curious once in their life.
Yeah.
Like, I'm glad that you got to explore that.
Right?
Yeah. I mean,
Um,
I get stoked on the Batman Forever Batmobile. It's probably one of my favorites.
Oh, it's cool.
But when I went to Warner Brothers a few years back, they have the Batman hangar kind of thing.
Mm.
The Batmobile at the time from Batman and Robin was there, and I was like, okay, that thing is sleek.
well,
I mean, it is cool.
the Batmobile is a perfect example of these films where it's just like, say what you will, it's different, but
Mhm.
you still want it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
You definitely still want it.
Oh, yeah.
You love this.
As long as it shoots fire out the back, I'm good.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
I'm good to go.
A-
I'm
and
good to
right.
go. It doesn't matter
that-
that every single one of his vehicles were destroyed in
oh,
every
in
movie.
5 minutes too.
Oh yeah.
Who cares?
I
I mean, it's
love
a good thing he's rich.
Right.
Right.
I love that. I mean, because and especially for the finale, right? That's the big thing. All right, we get the new suits, we suit up montage. Now we go in the cool new rides, and they
Mhm.
last 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so funny.
Like toys.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
pretty much, pretty
Because that's what they
much.
were trying to sell. They're
Oh,
like, hey,
absolutely.
kids, you like this? Go to the store and buy it.
And they
Good for
certainly
them.
did.
And we did.
But no, I mean, I think that just encapsulates these films. Like I said, I mean, like you still look at the Batmobile, and yeah, it's different and weird. It's unique for sure.
Very much so.
But we'd all still be jazzed about it. And
Oh, hell yeah.
these movies are the same way. They're no Michael Keaton. They're definitely no Christian Bale. They're not dark and broody consistently. Um, but they still hit a lot of the same beats, and they're consistently, for the most part, entertaining.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Like, I'll tell you this right now, man. Like, because DC Animated has done a few animated films, like, set in the 66 universe.
Hmm.
If they
Mm.
wanted to do a couple, like, an animated film set in the Schumacher verse, I would be first in
Be
line.
there.
Let's go.
I'm here for it. Well, and that's the thing is, like, we talked about it. Like, you know, if you really love the Keaton outing with Burton's whole aesthetic, great. They're making comics right now for you,
Mhm.
right? I really hope Schumacher's next.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Because oddly enough, I'm left where like the last one I felt was a really good time capsule, like a good beginning, middle, end across two films with a particular iteration of Batman. Would it have been cool to see more? Sure, but I also feel pretty satisfied.
Oh, yeah.
These leave me like, no, I would read the heck out of some comic issues dedicated to this colorful little world.
Absolutely.
absolutely.
I think it could be done very well. If you get the right artist, like it could be as vibrant as these movies. And I
Oh, yeah.
want to see it
Oh, yeah.
desperately.
Have fun with it. I think I
Exactly.
like I don't know. And as much as I love Marvel and the MCU, I do think it's done a disservice to comic book fans and film, because it's raised the expectations we have for the realism of comic book films.
Yeah.
Um, now, to their credit, they still keep it fun.
Mhm.
They
Yeah.
keep it very true to the various forms of these characters and stories that they're bringing to film. They still manage to make it funny and interesting,
Yeah.
but
They're good movies.
they're super high quality,
Yeah.
and we now think that everything comic or superhero-esque has to be that,
Yeah.
when in reality, its roots are in goofiness and
Mhm.
silliness and just fun.
Yeah, I can't remember the last time I sat back watching a Marvel movie and went like I did a few times with Batman and Robin. Like, this movie sucks. I love it.
Yeah.
This is so much fun,
Yeah.
but it's very bad.
Yeah, you never get the awful but good quality.
Hmm.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
you never get that.
Even
They're remarkably consistent.
yeah, even in the Marvel like shows, you kind of get it doesn't really add up to that standard.
Mm.
And you're even in the Marvel shows, you're even looking for like, is that it? Is that it? You gonna do more? Are we gonna do more? Are we gonna do more?
Right.
Just trying to live up to that quality, man. That's a lot.
Yeah.
And to their credit, they continue to deliver. I can say I've seen everything so far, and Marvel still hasn't let me down.
Yeah.
But I've become much more careful of viewing Marvel as Marvel, or I should say, viewing the MCU as the MCU. That is a
Yeah.
very particular universe, and viewing the rest of it, comic book and all that. Because I mean, I had the wrestling with Suicide Squad,
Mhm.
the latest one when it came out, where
Yeah.
it's just
The Suicide Squad.
like this is ridiculous.
Yeah.
This
Yeah.
is just
It was great.
nonsense for 90 minutes. Like
I loved it.
Yeah.
I'm about to say I loved it. Yeah.
It
No,
was so good.
I had to work myself around it because I was looking for Marvel in a non-Marvel movie. I
Yeah.
was looking for Marvel in a superhero movie, or well, anti-hero, uh, and I was watching it wrong. I'll just say.
Yeah.
And I think it's very easy to do considering there's 26 freaking Marvel movies. There's 3 new ones every year. They dominate,
Yeah.
and it almost feels like they're telling you how to view comic book films. Uh, it's the same thing of like when people try and replicate Star Wars to a point. I think it's just like
Mhm.
it's its own universe, guys. Enjoy
Yep.
Star Wars as Star Wars. Don't try and do Star Wars in the Old West or try and do, you know, try and recapture that in some other thing.
Yeah.
It's just not gonna work.
Yeah.
Um,
And fundamentally the DCEU is just messy. It's just messy.
Mhm.
And it always will be. Like, but the starkest contrast is that the MCU is remarkably consistent. They you know what you're going to get every time. And with DC, it's just like they're rolling the giant wheel, and it's like whatever we land on, that's what you get.
Yeah.
right.
And you kind of have to go into it letting each entity be its own thing, and you kind of have to abandon the idea of like everything is connected. There's like
Yeah.
whatever threads are connecting these things, they're very thin. Like,
Right.
you know,
The
you're
only
not
thing
getting
connecting the
large.
DCEU is David Dustmalchin.
Yeah.
Let's
Yeah,
be
that's it.
honest.
That's it.
Yeah, like you hit the nail on the head. It's just like take everything as its own thing. Like even these movies, right? Like even trying to connect these 4 movies in the same universe as they try to insinuate you should do, like it's okay if they're also each their own.
Yeah.
Like if Batman and Returns are one, if Batman Forever is one, and Batman and Rob, like it's okay to take it that way.
Yeah.
It's okay for it just to be one movie.
Mhm.
I know it's a lost concept. Sagas and trilogies abound in today's film market, but it's like no. Sometimes it's just one goofy movie.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm a fan of what James Gunn is doing in the DCEU right now.
Sure.
I from what I've seen of Peacemaker, it is just oof.
Absolutely.
And
Fantastic.
I'm absolutely okay. They do connect it, but I'm
Yeah.
absolutely okay if we lost Justice.
And
I'm not okay if we lost
Gotham.
Justice. But I'm okay if the the only thing that connects is Peacemaker and the Suicide Squad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I want a Ratcatcher project at some point because I love her dearly.
I mean, like, what
Right.
I've got to hand it to is because with my relationship with the DCU is a little fraught, like in the sense
Mhm.
that I accept it for what it is. It's like I said before, it's the messy best friend. That you
Yes.
realize that best friend is messy. You wish it would get their stuff together, but it's
But you
okay.
love to watch it.
Exactly. So, like, I would have loved to have seen the 5-film arc that Zack Snyder had planned. I think Warner Brothers definitely dropped the ball with the level of intrusiveness and control they tried to exact over that one guy's vision.
Mhm.
But I think I can confidently say that since then they've kind of learned from that mistake in the sense that they are letting filmmakers be filmmakers and lean into their own creative visions. James Gunn being a huge example of that. Like,
Yeah.
I'm going to give you a rated R Suicide Squad and you're going to release it. Or Matt Reeves saying, my Batman films are not going to be connected to anything and you're going to release it.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's okay.
I
Or
love it.
Andy Muschietti saying like, I'm going to have multiple Batman. I will have Ben Affleck in his swan song performance, and then I'm bringing back Keaton, baby.
Right.
Mhm.
And you're going to release it. Whoever's in charge at Warner Brothers now kind of figured out like, okay, if we start messing with these, directors' visions too much, we tend to turn out really bad stuff.
Yeah.
Right. Well, and I think that's the thing. I think that now DC is starting to get it in that like the messy and the uh disconnected and the independent is okay, and maybe that's our thing. Maybe we don't try and force an MCU for the DC.
Sure.
Okay, nobody asked you to.
Yeah. They certainly
Nobody
wanted
asked
to.
we just want a good Batman movie.
Yeah.
Like, and that's what has me hopeful for the Batman
Oh,
here
sure.
soon is because it's not trying to do too much. It's just trying to be a Batman movie, which we haven't had arguably since these.
Yeah.
I'd say. I mean, Nolan. That's a whole
Uh,
other capsule of a universe.
Mm-hmm.
The Nolan films are good,
Oh yeah.
but they're mostly just action movies, not necessarily Batman movies.
They're
Yeah, I mean,
they're the closest to MCU realism quality that DCU's been able to capture.
yeah. I mean, they stand alone for a number of reasons, which we'll get into later.
Yeah.
We will.
But I mean, they were definitely part of that. Because like you could honestly look at Batman and Robin if we're gonna loop this back to the films. Batman and Robin was kind of like the swan song of the big 90s blockbuster superhero film, because after that you could say that you could argue that the modern era of comic book films began with one of 3 films. I think you can make an argument for all 3 of these: Blade, X-Men, or Spider-Man.
Mm-hmm.
Ghost Rider was in there too.
That was a little later.
I'm not going to take Ghost Rider away from you.
Thank you.
I am more terrified of your bullying wrath than
I'm not
She
close
can
enough to
she
you
can
to
actually
pinch.
hurt me. Yeah. apparently.
But like you could argue that those 3 films kicked off the modern age of comic book films.
Yes.
And since then it's gotten more refined. It's become more character driven and less like the spectacle's part of it, but it's more character driven. And that's the MCU really took that concept and we're like, not only are we going to do character driven films, we're also going to connect everything. But DC, I find the characters more fascinating in DC because they're literally gods that are trying to fit into a human world. And it's like a recipe for ridiculousness. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
And
Absolutely.
I find that appealing.
Yeah, absolutely. Welcome back, Justus.
Hey, buddy.
Yeah, same here. Same here.
No beat missed. No one needs to know.
No.
Well, now that we got you back, one of the things we are aiming to end every episode on is something like I mentioned we learned from Spider-Man. No Way Home highlighted that every Spider-Man is valid for their own reasons. And by golly, I think we all agree every Batman is too. Technically, we have two to contend with, but for these Batman mans, for you, what's their thing? What makes these worth it, justified, and appealing for you?
Oh man, shoot, I'm gonna try not to go down this rabbit hole. I think they all kind of specifically touch on different things that made him him. There's a lot of things that cover Batman, and one of the reasons why he's one of my favorite, well, he is my favorite, um, is he is. There's so many layers to this guy. Like I don't think they touch on enough of his intelligence in most of the movies. But that's a huge. I mean, detective. I mean, it's a thing. But every single one touches on like a different part. One may touch on his childhood a little bit more. That made him him, obviously, and all of them that made him technically. But more, one of them touches on a little bit more. Some touches on his relationship with with one of the Robins, whichever one that is at the time. Then you have some that touches on his relationships and how that how that's affected in his life, and then other things touch on his relationship with Alfred, which we talked about a little bit earlier. But so many things that make him him. I feel like you can't just take one. You have to kind of take all of the pieces and all of the parts to make him him. Even the martial arts part, where we talk about the Christian Bale Batman, where he's took some time to talk about, hey, he trained for
He
a while.
legit learned how to kick butt.
Yeah,
Exactly.
exactly. So that touched more on that, which I don't think any of the other Batmans did that. So yeah, man, give me a little bit of everything. Give me a little bit of everything to make me the perfect Batman. I'll be good.
There you go. It's a smorgasbord of
Absolutely.
Batman.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. What about you, Kev? What does it for you for these Batmans?
Honestly, man, it's the spectacle, because Batman Forever gives you a little bit to chew on up here, a little bit. They get into a little bit of pathos. Batman and Robin is literally just one of those movies. Like, I'm gonna shut this off and just enjoy myself. You don't have to think too much, and it's refreshing to go back to these films to just have a good time. You don't have to think anything major about it. It doesn't have to make you question anything. You don't have to have an existential crisis because you watched a Batman movie, but you could just hey, you know what? For an hour and a half, I had fun, and I think that's it's a necessary balm, because I think what is equally amazing about the modern age we live in with comic book films is it gives us so much to chew on, but sometimes it can be a lot, I think I can speak for everybody that once we see the Batman, we're going to have to watch it a couple of times, because there's going to be so much stuff that is okay, I can't process all this at once.
Mhm.
You watch Batman Forever in the movie theater in 1995, you processed all of it at once. It was nice.
Exactly.
And I like that. It's nice to dip back into that. Plus, man, there's memories associated with these movies. I remember my aunt told me about it in early '95 that I had no idea Batman was coming out. My aunt lives in California, for a little added context, and when she told me about that movie coming out, my 6-year-old brain was like, is that what people in California do? They just know these movies are coming out? Is that a thing? You live in California, you're in the know? That's fascinating, And then, of course, the McDonald's cups. You remember those cups they released, with the awesome designs on it? It's nostalgia city, man. It's
Absolutely.
right in the veins.
Pepsi tastes better in those cups.
Absolutely. 100%.
Oh yeah, for sure. I definitely agree. I think each of these films did something with the character that was unique to each of them, and what they definitely strive to do was be way more fun, and kind of open the door for being able to have fun with dark characters. Because I really think if you're paying attention, none of the darkness of Batman necessarily goes away.
Sure.
It's definitely softened, maybe, but it's not. It's still there. He's still Batman. You just maybe, like you said, you're more entertained than engaged, and
That's
that's
a good way
okay.
of putting it. That's a good way of putting it.
Yeah.
And it's absolutely okay. And yeah, like you said, I think modern age, we're going to get a pretty complex Batman to chew on. And the next Batman series we talk about here with Nerdyverse is just as dense as I expect this new outing to be.
Boy, howdy, is it dense.
In a couple of weeks, we've got the Nolan Trilogy
Yes.
to sit with. And my gosh, that's going to be interesting to cover 3 dense films
Yes.
in an hour.
And going back to a point that I made like 15 minutes ago, the only thing connecting the DCEU is David Dastmalchian. The Dark Knight was his first movie.
That's true.
Insane.
That's true.
Like, he really is the core of the DCEU, even before it blossomed.
Right.
You're not wrong. You're not wrong. And he is a treasure.
He is absolutely fantastic. Go read Count Crowley if you haven't, by the way. It is a wonderful story.
Well, and speaking of treasures, both of you guys are absolute bat treasures.
You are.
We appreciate
I
y'all
didn't
so
speak
much.
myself.
Justice, for your second time, but not last, joining us, and then Kev,
Exactly.
you as well. You'll be back for some more Batmans.
Yes, we will.
Plenty more to discuss and chew on for sure. Kev, with your podcast and everything, where can the people find you if they want to follow you and your bat thoughts?
First off, don't follow our podcast.
Hey.
Don't debase yourself. You got you have better things to do with your time.
Yeah, if you're talking to our listeners, they've already got low standards. You're good.
Exactly.
You're
Okay, fair enough. So if you want to hear more of my garbage thoughts, you can go check out the Force Losers podcast. It's on every platform: Spotify, Apple. We're on YouTube whenever Brad gets off his butt and posts things.
Come on, Brad.
My Twitter handle's right down there at Force_Losers. I'm one of those people that like posts personally from the podcast account as opposed to getting my own podcast account because it's been like 4 years and I'm not doing it. But yeah, that's it. I'm really, really bad at like the selling thing.
Fine. It is high quality garbage, folks.
I mean,
Come to the dump.
nothing smells worse but better.
They're the McDonald's to our Burger King guys.
It's true. We're right across the street from each other.
And then Justice, I think you're the smoothie king in all of this.
Yes, you are. You're the A&W.
Nice.
There we go.
And you've got your handle there, and I know you do your social media fitness stuff and everything.
Yeah.
Do you have places that people can find and follow you to learn how to build their perfect bat body? If you want actual bat pecs instead of molded ones, follow Justice.
Yeah, you got to get the perfect nipples, man. Those work out.
It's all in the
you can do that. You can build the perfect nipples. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
No, but the one you see on the screen is more of me and my journey. But as far as getting with me, as far as training and everything like that in the business, that is at Gorilla Intensity, and that's everywhere you go. You'll find it at Gorilla Intensity on Instagram, Gorilla Intensity on Facebook, all one word. On Twitter, it's Gorilla Intensity without the Y, because there's only so much space for the letters. Intensity. Intensity in my mind is like intensity capital T, so nobody cares. But
intensive cup of tea. Yeah, Justice was actually smart with his branding, and he got unanimous branding, whereas I think we're different everywhere you go. But that's why we put links in the description.
There you go.
And so, yeah, definitely check out Kevin Justice and their various adventures, bat and otherwise related. We definitely appreciate having them, and we look forward to being back with Batman's. Like I said, in a couple of weeks, we are taking some time to talk some Star Wars because that is our first love, and we've got to talk about Boba Fett. He's my Batman of the Star Wars. If I had to put it away, and so we've got to take some time to chat about. Definitely not a controversial series at all. Star Wars is never controversial.
Spinning is a good trick.
Everybody's got positive things to say about Boba Fett.
Yeah.
And then also, beginning of March, we're taking some time to celebrate Rebels. Star Wars Rebels, the show, ended on March 5th. Golly,
Several years ago.
I want to say 6. It was 2016, I want to say.
Yeah, that sounds about the last time my heart was broken.
Right. You want to, you want to talk about some emotional damage.
Mhm.
And so what better way to process that than to share what we love? We're going to have some cool guests for that as well. Just trust that the guests for all future content are the main appeal, and just come back for all the awesome people we're going to have joining us and chatting with us about all of the cool stuff. We will not be talking about Jason Batman. That's a very different kind of content.
You can come
Jerry.
on for that one.
But you should definitely come back next Friday at 9 live
Yeah.
here, or if you're getting this in your ears after the fact, we do appreciate you. Be sure to check out the links in all of the descriptions everywhere for all of the important stuff, like our Patreon, because somehow people give us money and all of that other good stuff.
Nice.
And so, other than that, do you have anything else for the people, Boop?
Keep on nippling.
Keep on nippling. You heard it here.
Wait a minute. Wait a minute. You know, this is, excuse me, a damn fine cup of coffee.